The dollar sign was still painted in red when the rain began to fall. Emma stood barefoot on the wooden block, her belly swollen, her breath ragged, and her name, stripped away like a garment in front of strangers. Below, a man held up a crumpled sign, $1, for 6-month service. A drunk voice shouted, "She reads. She cleans. She's got fight." Somewhere in the crowd, a child whispered, "Papa, why is that lady crying?" And through the blur of tears and thunder, Emma saw the only hand not holding a coin, but reaching out instead. Quiet. Steady. Calloused. "I'll take her," the man said. "And she won't owe me anything except her own name." The town square had never felt more silent, even with the rain slapping hard against rooftops and bonnets. All of Blackwater Creek had come to gawk, men with clenched jaws, women with veiled eyes, and children gripping their mothers' skirts like this was a circus and not a public humiliation. Emma stood on the auction block, her fingers clenched into fists over the curve of her belly. The faded blue dress that once belonged to her mother clung to her thighs like a second skin, soaked through and betraying every inch of her trembling. $1, Walter shouted, hoarse and wavering. $1 for 6-month service. She's educated, Georgetown educated. She can cook, sew, write, and read the good Lord's scripture backward if you need it. The sheriff stood with arms crossed, unmoved, lips tight beneath his gray mustache. "Ain't technically illegal," he muttered when someone protested. She signed the papers. Except Emma hadn't. Not willingly. The signboard creaked as Walter raised it higher, his eyes darting from face to face like a dying gambler throwing his last dice. No one moved. A few women looked away. Even Mrs. Carson, the boarding house widow known for her sharp tongue, stared at the ground. Emma scanned the crowd through the downpour, her vision blurring not from rain, but shame. Her baby kicked hard, a fierce protest beneath her ribs, and Emma straightened, even as a tremor ran through her spine. She wouldn't bow. Not now. Not when everything had already been taken. Then, through the curtain of storm and scorn, a voice. "I'll take her." Heads turned. A man stepped forward, not with swagger or sarcasm, but with steady resolve. He was tall, broad-shouldered, sunburned at the throat, with clothes worn at the cuffs but clean. His boots bore the weight of real work, not saloon steps. And beside him stood a little girl in a threadbare coat, clutching a rag doll, staring up at Emma with wide, solemn eyes. Ethan Hayes. The room of whispers fell quiet. Walter blinked. "You serious, Hayes? You don't even know her." Ethan didn't respond to Walter. His eyes never left Emma's. "I don't have $15 like McGrew," he said plainly. "But I've got $10 and a place with a roof and firewood and food enough for 2. I don't need her to cook or clean. I just think she deserves better than standing barefoot in the rain being auctioned like cattle." The sheriff scratched his temple, unsure. McGrew, the saloon keeper, spat. "That ain't the game, Hayes. You underbid me." "I'm not bidding," Ethan replied. "I'm offering." Emma felt something crack inside her. Not pain, something stranger. A faint, reluctant hope. Walter laughed nervously, stepping down to meet Ethan. "Look, you don't get to just offer. There's rules to this." "No, Walter," Emma said, her voice soft but unshakable. "There are no rules when you sell your wife and your child for $1. The crowd gasped. Ethan looked at her, eyes calm. "Ma'am, you can say no. You can walk down and come with me or not. No pressure. No contract. Just safety for now. Until you figure out your next choice." Walter's face turned crimson. "She's mine." "No," Emma whispered. "Not anymore." She took a step off the block. Then another. Her foot hit the dirt with a squish, and with it came the sound of someone's breath catching, maybe hers. Maybe someone else's. Ethan offered his coat. Emma didn't take it. But she let his daughter wrap a small hand around her own, and the rag doll bumped against her thigh as they turned from the auction square. Behind them, Walter's voice faltered into nothing. They didn't speak on the walk to Ethan's wagon. The child, Lucy, broke the silence only once, when she looked up at Emma and said, "Papa says names are important." "I'm Lucy. What should I call you?" Emma hesitated, then said with a voice that sounded almost like it belonged to someone whole, "Emma." Lucy nodded. "Okay, Miss Emma." And just like that, she had a name again. As the wagon pulled away from Blackwater Creek, the rain softened to mist, and Emma looked back only once. The sign still hung crooked on the auction block, red paint running in thin trails, like blood trying to wash itself off wood. Inside her, the baby shifted, calm now. Ahead of her, a stranger with quiet eyes drove a wagon toward the mountains, and maybe, impossibly, toward something that looked a little like mercy. But could kindness ever come without cost? Emma wrapped her arms around herself, shivering not from the cold, but from the terrifying newness of being free. And she wondered, not for the first time, if dignity, once stripped, could ever truly be earned back. Or if a cradle waiting in a stranger's cabin would somehow hold not just a child, but the pieces of herself she had lost. The first time Emma had laid eyes on Walter Winters, it had been a Georgetown debate night. He wasn't part of the program, he was fixing the broken sound rig. His shirt had oil stains, his hands were calloused, but his grin had held that intoxicating mix of trouble and charm. She was top of her class then, international law and diplomacy, quoting foreign constitutions while sipping bad cafeteria coffee. Walter had called her the girl with fire in her bones, and she'd laughed, disarmed by the raw confidence of a man who didn't flinch at her intelligence. They married 6 months later. It wasn't love that faded, it was everything else. After the failed mining claim in Butte, after the debt collectors started knocking, after he began blaming her education for his shame, the man who once toasted her brilliance began telling her to stop talking like a damn professor. Still, Emma stayed. Until the day he came home smelling of rotgut whiskey, eyes bloodshot, and muttered, "I found a way to get us out of this. You'll just have to trust me." That night, she packed a small cloth bag with her mother's locket, the German fairy tale book she used to read aloud, and her unopened acceptance letter from the Foreign Diplomatic Service. The letter felt like a cruel joke now. She hadn't been able to say yes and be a mother at the same time. So she chose the child. And it had cost her everything. Now, the wagon bumped gently through a narrow trail shadowed by pine trees. Ethan didn't speak, and she didn't press him. Beside her, Lucy hummed a lullaby that Emma couldn't place. A quiet, haunting melody that sounded like something passed down over generations. Their home, Ethan's home, wasn't a grand homestead, just a hand-built cabin nestled at the edge of a clearing, smoke trailing from the chimney in lazy coils. Chickens scratched near the fence line, and a tired horse stood tethered under a sloping wooden awning. Inside, the warmth of the hearth was startling. It smelled of pine, stew, and something softer, like lavender oil soaked into old cloth. Miss Abigail greeted them not with warmth, but with sharp, assessing eyes. "This her?" she asked. "She's pregnant," Ethan said simply. Miss Abigail nodded once. "Then she sleeps in the front room. Lucy'll bunk with me." "I don't need charity," Emma murmured, more to herself than them. Ethan didn't correct her. He just pointed to the stew pot. "Food's warm. You're welcome to it. After that, rest." Lucy tugged her doll close. "I can show you the room, Miss Emma." There were no locks, no contracts, no whispered negotiations in hallways. That night, Emma sat curled under a heavy wool blanket, the baby pressing gently against her ribs, and stared at the carved wooden beams of the ceiling. It was quiet in the cabin, quiet like she hadn't known in years. Not just silence from noise, but silence from fear. Her hands trembled when she removed her boots. The soles were worn through. The left heel was cracked. Her pinky toe had rubbed raw through her sock. All things she hadn't let herself notice until now. In the dark, she whispered a name she hadn't spoken in months. Hope. It wasn't a prayer. Just a word she wanted to remember how to say. Over the next few days, Emma worked quietly, gathering eggs, washing linens, learning the rhythm of this place. She spoke little, but watched everything. Ethan never touched her. He never asked for anything. He built things, quietly, methodically, with the focus of a man rebuilding his soul, one plank at a time. And Lucy, dear, wide-eyed Lucy, became a gentle tether. She'd appear in the mornings with questions about the baby. Will it cry a lot? Can it hear music? Does it dream yet? Emma answered what she could. And when she couldn't, she let Lucy rest her cheek against her belly and talk to it herself. One night, as the fire cracked low and wind howled outside the shutters, Emma caught Ethan watching her. Not in the way other men had watched. Not with hunger or judgment. But with something closer to curiosity. She looked up, unafraid. You're not going to ask what happened to make me stand on that block? Ethan shook his head slowly. No need. The man who let that happen already told me everything I needed to know. Emma blinked. The kindness in that answer hit her harder than any question would have. But, he added, voice low and even, if you ever want to tell it your way. I'll listen. She nodded once. Then, for the first time, she said, his name's Walter. Yours? Emma. Winters. For now. Ethan paused. Only for now. She looked down at her hands. I don't want my child to carry a name that was auctioned like a goat in springtime. And Ethan, the man who had built a room for someone he'd never met, just said, then let's make sure they don't have to. Outside, snow began to fall. Quiet, soft, and steady. And for the first time in months, Emma slept without dreaming of running. The storm didn't announce itself, it crept in slow. First, the wind shifted. Then the chickens wouldn't settle. By nightfall, snow whipped sideways across the Hayes homestead, howling like a banshee clawing at the eaves. Emma was bent over Lucy's spelling lesson when the knock came, 3 hard raps against the cabin door that made the oil lamp flicker. Ethan opened it. Walter stood on the threshold. His beard was patchy, his coat threadbare. Snow clung to his boots like judgment. Well, Walter said, voice slick and venomous, don't I get a hello? Ethan didn't move. Emma rose slowly behind him, hand instinctively cradling her belly. The baby kicked, hard. Walter's eyes flicked to her. Then to the fire-lit room. The stew on the table. Lucy's doll on the floor. Quite the cozy little setup, he sneered. Didn't take long, did it? You sold me, Emma said, her voice cold as the wind behind him. For $1. Walter stepped forward, but Ethan blocked him. That was a contract for domestic service, Walter snapped. Not marriage. You were still my wife. No, Emma said firmly. I stopped being yours the moment you priced me like livestock. Walter's eyes narrowed. I came to check on what's mine. And I brought this. He held up a folded parchment, stamped with a county seal. Legal proof. Contractual violation if she refuses to return. Miss Abigail entered then, wiping her hands on her apron, eyes narrowing at the sight of Walter. You think the law favors a man who bartered his pregnant wife? Walter ignored her. This land, he said, looking at Ethan now, isn't yours to shelter her on. I can take her right now. And the child? The child has a name, Emma snapped. And she won't know a man like you. Walter smirked, stepping closer. Then let the courts decide. I'll see you in town. I've got a judge's hearing scheduled the day after Christmas. Let's see how your mountain man handles the law. Then, to Ethan, "You should have stayed out of it." And with that, he was gone, snow swirling in his wake. That night, Emma couldn't eat. Ethan sat across from her, carving a small cradle rail in silence. His hands were steady, but his jaw clenched. "He'll win," Emma whispered finally. "The law won't see $1 as abuse. They'll see it as temporary hardship. They'll give him visitation. Maybe custody." Ethan didn't look up. "He won't take her." Emma met his eyes. "He already did. In a way." Ethan set down his tools. "Then we changed the story." She blinked. "How?" "We marry," he said simply. Emma's breath caught. "Not out of pity," he added. "Not out of fear. But out of choice. You choose to stay. I choose to protect. Lucy already thinks of you as hers. I think. I do too." Emma's heart thudded. "It wouldn't fix the law," she said. "No," he said. "But it would show her who stood with her. Who claimed her." Emma swallowed hard. "You barely know me. I know the way you hold Lucy when she's scared. I know how you whisper German lullabies to the baby. I know you read by candlelight after everyone's asleep, not for escape, but because knowledge makes you feel alive. I know more than enough." And she realized then, he did. Miss Abigail knocked softly on the frame. "He won't stop," she said. "Not unless someone makes him." Emma nodded. "Then I will." The next morning, she wrote a letter. Not to the sheriff. Not to the judge. To Walter. "You may carry the papers, Walter. But I carry the child. And I carry the truth. I will not run. I will not yield. If you want to face me, it will be in the open. In front of those same people who watched you auction me off. And they'll know what kind of man wants to steal a child to reclaim his pride." The letter was delivered by Abigail herself. And Emma took Ethan's coat from the wall, pulled it around her shoulders, and stepped into the snow to chop firewood herself. Swing by swing. Blow by blow. Until her arms shook. Because she wasn't that girl on the block anymore. She was the storm now. And winter was far from over. Christmas Eve broke in silence. No wind. No storm. Just a sky white with unfallen snow and a stillness so profound it felt like the world was holding its breath. Emma stood before the small wooden mirror in Miss Abigail's cabin, smoothing the borrowed ivory shawl over her shoulders. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what today meant. Behind her, Lucy hummed a carol softly while braiding a ribbon into her own hair. "Miss Emma," she said, eyes wide in the mirror, "do you think Grace will remember this day?" Emma smiled, pressing a hand to her belly. "If not, I'll tell her every Christmas for the rest of our lives." The chapel was warm with lanternlight and pine, filled with townspeople who once turned their faces at an auction but now sat with hands folded, waiting. Judge Parker stood by the altar, not in his robes, but in his wool coat, somber. Miss Abigail sat in the first pew with a folded paper in her hand. The paper Walter had signed that morning. He had surrendered all claims. No contest. No theatrics. Just a shaky signature, eyes downcast. "I can't be her father," he'd muttered to the judge. "But maybe I can stop being her shame." And then he left. No goodbyes. Just a final nod toward the cradle Ethan had built, and vanished. Now, standing before the altar, Emma turned toward Ethan as Reverend Collins spoke the last line, "And with this union, let no man tear asunder what dignity and grace have joined." Ethan reached out. She placed her hand in his. The warmth of it, rough and steady, made her throat tighten. "I never dreamed of this," Emma whispered as they turned toward the pews. Ethan leaned in, just enough for her to hear. "Then let's dream it forward." The crowd stood. Applause rose like a wave, not thunderous, but warm, like the crackle of a fire that fills a cold room. Afterward, back at the homestead, Lucy danced in her stocking feet while Miss Abigail stirred stew and Emma sat in the rocking chair by the fire, cradle beside her, half-knitted blanket resting in her lap. Ethan stepped out onto the porch, and Emma followed. The snow had begun to fall again, soft, clean, without malice. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, "This land, it's yours now, too." Emma turned to him. "I don't need land to feel home." He nodded. "Still. You have it." They stood side by side, shoulders touching. "I'll teach Grace about her father," Emma said softly. "Not Walter. The one who showed up every day without needing to be asked. The one who held space, and didn't fill it with control." Ethan's eyes shimmered. "And I'll teach Lucy what it means to trust a woman's strength, not to fear it." She leaned into him. "Then we've already raised better than we came from." The baby stirred. They turned. Inside, Grace had shifted in her sleep, one tiny hand reaching upward as if toward the ceiling, or maybe a dream. Ethan opened the door for Emma, and together they stepped inside. By morning, the cradle would have a name carved in its side. Grace Emma Hayes. The name of a child not born from ownership, or silence, or fear. But from a mother who chose again. From a father who never once walked away. And from a girl who once stood barefoot on a splintered block in Montana, but now walked barefoot by firelight in her own home, her own name, her own forever. The snow kept falling. And this time, no one came to take anything away. Only to stay.